Racially motivated and anti-government extremist threats are a concern ahead of Election Day. The New York Police Department says people at polling sites, poll workers, and politicians should all remain vigilant. CBS News, sorry.
That's okay. CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Sganga has been joining us. I paused for a little and Vlad was like, I'll just pick it up.
Because you were looking at Nicole and I was still looking at this camera.
I totally was. I was looking at that woman's coat, actually. The video that we just popped up, her coat looks very much like a poodle. So, Nicole, serious note now. We are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day now. The NYPD bulletin is urging vigilance at polling stations, as if it wasn't tough enough to get people to work these polls. What are we learning about the concerns?
Anne-Marie, that's right. There are more than 1,100 polling sites in New York City that turn operational tomorrow. That's how close we are. This bulletin from NYPD's Intelligence Bureau notes that while police are not aware of any specific or credible threats to those sites, and that means outline plans targeting them, they're worried about an increasingly complicated threat environment. In particular, the concern centers around racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists, some of whom have already issued general threats and hostile warnings online, in chat groups, social media platforms, even encrypted messages. This kind of language in online echo chambers can reinforce false narratives, conspiracy theories surrounding the election, creating a ripe environment for violence. Now, it is standard operating procedure for NYPD to distribute an intelligence bulletin around elections, but this warning is notable at a time when election officials across the country have reported threats following former President Donald Trump's repeated false claims about the 2020 election.
So, Nicole, the bulletin also warns that local candidates may also be targeted due to what they're saying is a smaller security footprint. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Vlad, it's not just polling sites and election workers. The concern extends to lawmakers, candidates, many of whom have a lighter security footprint at events leading up to Election Day. Our viewers may remember in July, Representative Lee Zeldin, the Republican nominee for governor in New York, was attacked by a man during a campaign event outside of Rochester. Now, luckily, Zeldin was not hurt. The man responsible for lunging at the congressman faces a federal charge and enrolled this week in a court-ordered patient treatment program while he awaits trial. But in the wake of January 6th, warnings from law enforcement, U.S. Capitol Police, the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and others, highlighting increases in calls for violence from domestic violent extremists directed not only at election events and polling sites, but political candidates themselves and their party offices.
So earlier this month, police in the Phoenix suburb of Mesa responded to 2 masked individuals carrying guns and wearing bulletproof vests. They showed up at ballot drop boxes, which, one might find a little unnerving if you're trying to drop off your ballot early. Sure. How is law enforcement responding to this, stepping things up? I don't know if there are any actually laws around that would prohibit someone from doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone said this week that his office has already begun providing additional security around ballot drop boxes after sheriff deputies had responded, as you mentioned, Anne-Marie, when 2 armed men donning tactical gear and masks showed up at this drop box in the Phoenix suburbs. Arizona's Secretary of State this week also saying her office has referred 6 cases of potential voter intimidation to the state attorney general and the U.S. Department of Justice. Among them, another voter reporting being filmed, photographed, and followed by a car out of the parking lot at that same ballot drop box location near Phoenix. Even before these recent incidents, though, the sheriff's county in Maricopa County had determined there'd be no vacations for officers in the week running up to the election. It's all hands on deck. This week, Sheriff Penzone called the considerable amount of resources put forth just so voters can feel safe voting absurd.
So the Department of Justice has also reported a string of violent threats against election workers ahead of the November 8th midterm elections. So what are the steps that the federal government is taking to protect poll workers?
Yeah, the FBI is monitoring this. They've identified 7 states, including Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, that have recently seen unusual threat levels against poll workers. And last summer, the Department of Justice launched an election threat task force. They say they've reviewed over 1,000 hostile or harassing contacts reported by election officials. So far, we've seen just a handful of charges and 1 conviction, but investigators say their work is not yet done. A report earlier this year by the nonpartisan Brennan Center for Justice found nearly 1 in 3 local election officials know at least 1 worker who has left their job due in part to safety concerns, elevated threats, or intimidation. And we know that poll worker shortages remain an issue in at least 400 jurisdictions nationwide, according to the recruiting initiative Power the Polls. Now, CISA, which is the nation's cyber agency that also helps to oversee election security, actually released a 15-minute training video earlier this month outlining non-confrontational techniques for poll workers who may deal with harassment or intimidation. Vlad and Marie, some election officials I've spoken with in states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona have had to make the difficult decision to install cameras, fencing, magnetometers around their polling places to safeguard workers, many, though, still looking for federal funds to help offset those new costs.
Wow, Nicole, thank you very much.
Thank you.